Nestled in the beating heart of East Belfast and near the famous Titanic Quarter is a small area known as Sydenham. Historically, it would have once housed some of the many workers from the nearby Harland and Wolff shipyard, and there has been a train station here since November 1851. Nowadays, it is still a huge centre of industry within the city, and the cacophony of sound from the main road and neighbouring city airport is a near constant racket. It is probably the last place that you would expect to find anything remotely natural whatsoever. But nature will always find places to thrive, even in the most unrelenting of urban environments. For tucked away, just off the main road of the Sydenham bypass, there is an absolutely wonderful sanctuary for the local wildlife and for the local people who come to visit it. This vital green space within the city is called Victoria Park, and like many things in Belfast, it takes its name from Queen Victoria. For Belfast was originally a Victorian city, a true child of the explosive industrial revolution of the early 1800s. Prior to this, Belfast was once merely a small, marshy settlement formed at the confluence of several substantial rivers. Among these was the river Farset, which is where Belfast gets its name from, for the Irish Béal Feirste translates to mouth of the Farset, marking the point where it joins the Lagan at modern-day Queen's Bridge. It now flows underneath the city in a huge tunnel, which is apparently large enough to drive a bus through. For in just a few short centuries, Belfast underwent rapid industrial growth and quickly became known as the linen capital of the world. And it is here in East Belfast where much of that growth happened. And so, to commemorate this, in 1854, the Belfast Harbour Commissioner planned to use the nearby Conn River to make a brand new park for this flourishing modern city. But due to the marshy ground caused by Belfast's many interlocking rivers, the park was not actually open to the public until 1906. The chief landscaper was Charles McKim, who was also responsible for developing the tropical ravine in the nearby Botanic Gardens. Since then, it has become one of Belfast's most important natural spaces and is now part of an area of special scientific interest. Mad, really, considering how entirely surrounded it is by Belfast's urban sprawl, a last bastion of the native plants and animals that once would have called Belfast their home. Trees like the mighty oak would have once been commonplace all throughout Ireland. This is clearly shown by its original Irish name, Durrach, and the name for an oak grove, which was Durra. Place names all throughout Ireland still bear variations of this in their name, even in their anglicised versions, such as Derry and Kildare. But unfortunately, the ancient oak forests were almost entirely cleared away during the Irish plantations, and now only small pockets of these mighty trees remain. Victoria Park is teeming with all sorts of important native flora, including ones that aren't often as fondly regarded as an old oak tree. And reaching out from the riverbank are thorny arms that bear succulent, sweetened gifts in their prickly palms. The chalky white and pink flowers of the bramble, or drisiog in Irish, are a valuable source of food for all manner of insects, but are a real favourite of honeybees and bumblebees. These flowers will start to bloom throughout the late spring into the early summer, coinciding with the brilliant white of cow parsley and the mayflower. In the late summer, these flowers will magically metamorphosize into delicious blackberries, glistening clusters of sugary goodness that will no doubt fill many a jam jar or pie dish in the coming autumn months. They are a valuable source of vitamin C, have strong healing powers, and were used to form field boundaries in the days before barbed wire. The brambles in Victoria Park are a wonderful foreground to one of the most vibrant ecosystems that Belfast has to offer. For these shallow waters are the perfect habitat for a wide variety of river birds that have made the park their home. Some, like these black-tailed godwits, or gwildneachieardh in Irish, are wading birds who use their long stoat-like legs to stride out into the murky water and pluck out little delicacies with their equally long bills. These can range from aquatic plants, small insects, and even unfortunate little tadpoles who happen to be swimming past at that inopportune moment. The black-tailed godwits are very similar to their cousins, the bar-tailed godwits, although the black-tailed godwits can be seen here all year round, while their bar-tailed relations venture off to the freezing Arctic lands up north to breed. And during the breeding season, the males of both types develop a striking orange plumage in an attempt to stand out from the crowd. The black-tailed godwits have slightly more orange around the spots on their backs, whereas the bar-tailed ones generally seem to have smaller, creamier spots. Pairs of godwits will often partner up for life, but if one doesn't arrive to the breeding grounds on time, then they can be divorced, in a sense, in which case a new partner would have to be selected depending on the vibrancy of their orange bib. They will then lay between 3 to 6 eggs, which fledge after about a month or so, and then the young godwits will embark on their first winter migration across the Great Sea. They are a beautiful bird, of which there are many in Victoria Park. And my partner Ren has just spotted one of our all-time favourites, quickly deploying a camera to check it out through the viewfinder. Perched on the far bank is an ethereal sentinel from another world, a lone sentry watching over the shimmering, shifting water's surface for a tasty morsel swimming by. It's a kind of heron, but its dazzling, pure white plumage conveys the sensation that there is nothing on this world quite like a little egret, or egret beag in Irish. At a time, they were a very rare sight in Ireland. The beautiful plume-like feathers that project from their heads were once cruelly harvested to adorn Victorian hats. To such an industrial scale, in fact, that it was one of the main factors that prompted the formation of the RSPB. But now they have bounced back and are widespread all around Ireland's coasts and have even reached 4 separate continents around the world. Being both a talented poet and photographer, Ren has written a lovely poem about the little egret called 2 Wings, which I'll read to you now. A curlew shared steps with a little stint. The 2 danced as the waves snuck in. A plover chased the shoreline. You, little egret, angel of the riverbed, flew stark white against the grey sky and turned back, glancing past those outstretched wings. 2 rooks gawked in their usual ways. You did not hear them. You were long gone. The wind still carried your wing beats. You soared past a lone cow in a sparse field and the swelling tide and did not see me, poised with camera in hand. Always just missing you, always out of frame, until a landing. As you looked back at me, I heard, "Keep going," in the wind. Suddenly, a distant rumble becomes a near earth-shaking tremor, for upwards in the sky, a truly enormous metallic behemoth soars overhead, stirring the tranquility of this ancient natural scene. The passenger airplanes of the neighbouring city airport are a relative newcomer to the skies of Belfast, but they have quickly asserted dominance and are now the undisputed kings of wind and air here in Victoria Park, the long shadows they cast eclipsing all as they thunder past overhead. The towering cranes of Harland and Wolff loom over the park's tallest trees, golden relics of Belfast's industrial past. Looking at them, you can almost hear the monotonous beats of metal on metal, haunting ghostly remnants that echo through this land of feather and forest. But now, as of times long ago, they have been replaced by the raucous calls of all manner of birds that congregate in these waters, but few are quite so loud and distinctive as the guttural yell of the scavenging black-headed gulls, a key component of the soundscape here. They are called Slevin in Irish, though they can go by many names. Conn Lagan describes how the word for gull, Fhuelion, means one who circles or spins or cries, or simply just wild one. While Fhuelionda, the description for being gull-like, also means sweeping, graceful, or being of brightest appearance. That is very much true of the black-headed gulls, especially in the summertime when the dark colouring on their heads is at its most striking in appearance. They will almost entirely lose this dark colouring during the winter, but their name remains, a promise of future revelry in the year to come. Though really, their heads are more of a dark brown colour. It is more so their continental cousins, the Mediterranean gulls, who have a pure black head. They are widespread residents in Ireland, both inland and along the coasts, where they are usually seen scavenging for insects and other pieces of floating debris in the water. And they can often live for about 11 years, though the oldest ringbird was found in 2018 at the ripe old age of 32. And much like any other species of gull, they have adapted to city life well, and seem just at home hovering above the streets of Belfast as they do on the rocky shores of Ireland's coastline. As does another frequently seen resident of Belfast, the pretty difficult to pronounce lesser black-backed gull. Called Dromneach Beag in Irish, they are distinguishable from other gulls by their yellow legs and the distinctive dark grey colouring on their wings. But don't be deceived by their name. These are large gulls and cut a powerful figure when seen strutting past smaller birds, their formidable glower passing judgment on anyone who believes them to be lesser. Their slightly less threatening neighbours are the feral pigeons, city birds who are descendants of the rock dove, also known in Ireland as comb alia. Rock doves were domesticated somewhere between 3,000 to 10,000 years ago, and up until recently they were kept in captivity to perform a variety of beneficial tasks to humanity. But now many of these pigeons have returned to wildlife, but in a totally different world to the one they left all those many years ago. But even still, they are about as widespread and commonplace in cities as cars and coffee shops, and are an inspirational success story of how quickly nature can adapt to a rapidly changing world. The waterways of Victoria Park surround a large central island where many more natural splendours are waiting to be discovered. This bridge is rather simply called the Victoria Park Bridge and was opened in December 2005. Venturing across it, we can now plunge into the reassuring shade of native tree cover. The earthy smells and soft sounds of crunching gravel pair up wonderfully with the confined views on either side of the path. It's easy to forget that you're still in one of Ireland's most major cities when you're dandering through places as serene as this. Another commonly misunderstood plant that grows here is the nettle, or the nean toig in Irish. Despite their painful sting, these leaves contain significant quantities of iron and were used to cure a range of different ailments and diseases in the past. The exterior fibres of their stalks can also be braided by hand to form different types of cordage, which can be used for all manner of different things like fishing ropes, washing lines, bags, baskets, and even seating for furniture. When these fibres are spliced, they can even be sewn into garments made entirely of natural resources. The nettles bask in the sheltered embrace of a great big willow tree, also called the saliog in Irish. The rusty willow is also known as a sally, which is an anglicisation derived from this original Irish name. These are the same sallies that are referenced in the old folk song Down by the Sally Gardens, which was preserved in the poetry of W.B. Yeats in 1889. Willow is a very fast-growing tree, and such sally gardens were kept to harvest the willow branches, for these branches are incredibly flexible and therefore were a perfect material for basket weaving. This is a truly ancient craft and would have once been practiced all over Ireland, particularly around the area surrounding Lagan. Now, only a handful of basket weavers remain, but the willows live on, their gentle fluttering leaves a welcome sanctuary for weary travellers. Just across the water, Wren has spotted some more exciting wildlife activity. It's a gaggle of grey-lag geese, or gay glass in Irish. They are a splendidly majestic type of goose, and the park is absolutely teeming with them. They mainly eat grass and other water vegetation, so this waterlogged environment is an absolute paradise for them. The grey-lag geese in Ireland often breed in Iceland and then fly here for the winter, but the population in Victoria Park is here all year round. And in the early summer, pairs of geese who have partnered for life will start laying eggs, and then little goslings, like this one, will appear a few weeks later, where they will be warmly welcomed into the wider family group. They form a tight-knit circle and do get on well with the other birds, but unfortunately, their presence can be damaging to the ecology here. Increasing global temperatures have caused more birds to become year-long residents, causing toxicity levels in the waterways to grow due to their droppings. As a result, many places in Ireland are trying to reduce grey-lag geese populations, including here in Victoria Park. But other birds are far more in tune with the native ecosystem, like this wise old grey heron. It is commonly known as Corresh in Irish, roughly meaning large bird of the marsh. But it has many other names, including Sheila na Portach, meaning Sheila of the bog. Their flight path was often seen as an indication of the weather, for if they flew downstream then everything was grand, but if they flew up the river, well, it meant that a big downpour of rain was on the way. They absolutely dwarf their little egret cousins when standing together on the bank, and with their chest puffed out like that, I really think they look like some great bearded fisherman patiently waiting for his catch to come in. Another common sight along these shores are the little white-faced coots, or Ciarcianan, along with their floating homes of reeds and rushes. Their nests are often built out in the open, but this isn't a huge problem, as despite their size, coots can be pretty fearsome when they want to be. Although they aren't the best of flyers, coots can charge through the water like a furious tiny tsunami and lash out at their adversaries with their surprisingly enormous feet. But they're more often than not just seen passively bobbing about amongst the rushes, nearly completely enshrouded in shadow save for their brilliant white face. They usually hang about with their cousin the moorhen, or Ciarc Uisce, which means water hen, though some also know them by the slightly funny name of swamp chicken. They are slightly smaller than the coots, but are no less majestic due to the bright red and yellow patterning on their head and legs. These triumphant flashes of colour are unique to the moorhens, making these proud little birds stand out amongst their larger neighbours. And just like the coots, they have absolutely enormous feet which they use to paddle themselves through the water. And even though they do look very cumbersome, the moorhen can apparently run on land very quickly and can sometimes be seen charging at predators who have ventured just a little too close to their nest for their liking. They are often seen as signs of good fortune in folklore as well, and it is said that if you rise a moorhen when passing by the river, good luck will follow you on the rest of your journey. If you're lucky, you might catch a fleeting glimpse of this tiny little firecracker as you're ambling through the dense woodland of Victoria Park. The spirited chaffinch is called Rí Rua in Irish, which pretty appropriately means Red King. The male's regal colours are extra glamorous in the spring and early summer when they are on the lookout for partners to nest with. But they're not alone in the tarnished verdure of the canopy though, for the shadowy silhouette of a blackbird looks on from its perch, nestled deep in the embrace of the surrounding foliage. In Irish, the female blackbirds are called Ciarsiach, but the black males are called Lon Dubh, and there's an old story that tells of how the blackbird used to actually be white, but then one day he greedily plunged his head into a pot of gold, searching for a piece of treasure. He'd been warned not to do this though, and it is said that he was then punished by having his dazzling white coat snatched away from him. But because his beak had touched the treasure, it remained that lovely golden yellow from that day onwards. Now their tarnished plumage cloaks them in darkness, enabling them to vanish into the undergrowth whenever they need to make a hasty escape. Like all Irish birds, they rely on the routine seasonal availability of materials and food that the native flora provides. All of Ireland's trees play their own special part in the grand wheel of the year, and thus were all revered and treated with respect by the people of old. So much so, in fact, that Ogham, Ireland's original alphabet and the foundation for its language and culture, was derived from the names of the ancient trees. This one here is elder, and its Irish name, Rush, formed the letter R in this tree alphabet. Currently, it is in its most eye-catching form when the tiny buds of the elderflowers unfold in the early summer, decorating the forest with intricate umbrellas of astonishing luminosity. These flowers were used to make wine during the great summer fire festival Bealtaine, as were the elderberries during the dark times of Samhain later on in the year. It is said that you can observe fairy processions when sitting under an elder tree during the midsummer. But falling asleep under one runs the risk of you being zipped away to the other world of Tír na nÓg, the land of the ever-living ones. So maybe it's better to enjoy your elderflower wine from the safety of your own home instead. And because of their connection with the other world, it is believed that flutes made of elder can also summon spirits, and the elder can often be found growing around graveyards as well, due to its association with the spirit world. Carpets of white creep along the footpaths in Victoria Park, brimming with little daisies that poke their tiny heads out of the grass. They are called nóinín in Irish, and they will close and open their flowers to follow the sun's passage overhead. They are often clustered around beads of yellow in the foliage, and at a closer glance, they turn out to be the happy flowers of the evocatively named buttercup. Its Irish name is Béal Feirste, and was traditionally used to cure all sorts of pains and problems, such as toothaches, headaches, and heartburn. It was often also allowed to grow near fields of cows, as it was believed to improve the butter made from their milk if they ate it. There are some great stories about the buttercups, such as one about a man who found a pot of gold when walking through a field at night. Delighted with his discovery, he ran off to secretly bury the pot in the woods. But by the time he got there, all of the gold had tumbled out as he stumbled along his way. He was raging, and he traced back his step all the way to the field where he initially found the pot. But when he bent down to pick up the gold pieces, he found that they had all taken seed and grown into buttercups instead. And since then, they have now become a home to all manner of little creatures, such as this tiny spittlebug. This little yellow fellow is so named because he is normally coated in a bubbly cocoon, which does, to be fair, look quite a lot like spit. In fact, it is often known as cuckoo spit, because their appearance usually coincides with the return of the cuckoo in the early summer, much like the cuckoo flower as well. Eventually, they will turn into frog hoppers, which are able to jump almost a meter in height at truly astonishing speed. The summery sound of whirring insect wings hums by overhead, but few move quite so fast as this. Hoverflies like this one can perfectly suspend themselves in the air using unbelievably fast and precise wing movements. This is also what allows them to weave through the densest areas of vegetation to reach plants that are unattainable to most other pollinators. There are plenty of other familiar pollinators around the park too, like this fuzzy little tree bumblebee. In Irish, bumblebees are called bumbogue, and as you'd expect, this one usually nests in hollowed out nooks in tree trunks. There is a lot of folklore surrounding the bees in Ireland, for they are usually seen as winged messengers from the other world, bringing wisdom from the Sidhe as they mosey about their daily business. Honeybees in particular were very well respected, as when a death in the family occurred, they would be informed about it just like anyone else. Then their hives would be adorned with black cloth, with the bees themselves being given some of the food from the funeral. They were protected under the old Irish Brehon law too, which is one of the oldest legal systems in Europe. For stealing a hive was a serious offence, and you were also encouraged not to attack the bees if you were stung. But you would be compensated with a pot of honey from their beekeeper though, which would help to sweeten the deal a good bit. Pushing on a bit further, a chorus of distinctive quacks floating upstream heralds the arrival of our next sighting, and what a welcoming sight it is. The friendly faces of the mallard ducks are a common sight throughout most of Ireland's waterways, lazily drifting along without paying much attention to anything in particular. Manchán Magan describes how their Irish name Lagan can translate to fair young girl, an endearing term that reflects the beauty of their shimmering plumage. Unfortunately though, their easygoing nature was often taken advantage for, as one marriage custom describes how a duck would be captured and then suspended over a doorway with a willow rod. This was an invitation for guests to bring porter along to the celebration, the thinking being that the couple were as fond of porter as the duck was fond of water. It was also tradition to kill and eat a duck when St. Martin's Day rolled around on the 11th of November, as this would supposedly help to keep the cattle safe during the following year. People would also try to pour the water they had used to wash their feet over a duck, as they believed this would help with foot problems. Luckily though, the duck's feathers are coated in an oily substance that wards off water, so hopefully this won't have bothered them too much. This characteristic is also the origin of the phrase water off a duck's back, describing troubles that have no effect on a person. They're not the only ducks in the pond though, as suddenly a newcomer cruises on by in a stylish getup. This is a tufted duck, or lacavadonach in Irish, so named for the suave, slicked back cluster of feathers that tumbles down the back of their neck. The hens are slightly browner in colour, but the drakes also rock a splendid black and white outfit that seamlessly pulls their sporty look together. This really helps to accentuate the gleaming golden eye that glowers out from the darkness of their head, like a dazzling amber jewel that sparkles with the stars on a dark winter's night. Unlike the mallards, tufted ducks dive underwater to gobble clams and mussels from the riverbed, though their ducklings prefer to try their luck with the zippy little insects that congregate on the water during the early summer. To accommodate this, the parents usually try to tie in their egg-laying with the emergence of the first insect larvae, so that there is plenty of food available for when their babies hatch. Victoria Park is a place filled to the brim with wondrous gifts from the natural world, and we've seen quite a lot of them on our walk today. But one of the most astonishing sights of all is hiding just around the corner, tucked away from the wild rumpus of birds that congregate near the park's main bridge. Through a magical window in the trees, their ghostly forms come into view. Mute swans, or yellow volve in Irish, are one of 3 types of swans who are known to frequent Ireland. They are so called because they are generally a lot quieter than their Buicks and whooper swan cousins. But they are far from mute though, which you'll quickly find out if you venture a step too close to their nest. They are one of the largest birds in Ireland, and few cut such a magnificent figure, their long serpentine necks towering over all like an illustrious sovereign surveying their subjects, enthralling any who meet with their venerable gaze. This adult is encircled by a ballet of cygnets, which are covered in a nice fluffy coating of brown, downy feathers to keep them cozy while they grow. That won't take them too long though. Cygnets usually reach adult size in just 3 months, though they'll usually hang around with their family for a good while after that. The adult cobs and pens will pair up for life, often living right into their 20s, though they can live beyond this, as shown in one of Ireland's most famous stories, The Children of Lear. This is the story of how the mythical King Lear's children were transformed into swans by his spurned wife Aoife, who he did not care for in the way he did his children. They would remain this way in their swan bodies until they had lived for 300 years on Loch Derrivara in County Westmeath, and then another 300 years in the Sea of Moyle around Ballycastle and Rathlin Island, and a final 300 years more at Joris Domnan and the Isle of Inishglora off the coast of County Mayo. Aoife had a far worse fate than this though, as when her brother Bob Dearg, High King of the Tuatha Dé Danann at that time, found out about what she'd done, he asked her what form would most horrify her to become, to which she said a demon of the air. And without a second thought, her brother transformed her into a nightmarish, spectral scream of unimaginable terror that instantly ravaged through the air and has not ceased to this day, as the story goes. The poor children outlived their father and all who ever knew them, until the day their curse finally came to an end. They transformed back into human form, but the irrepressible passage of time quickly caught up to them and snuffed out their lives in the blink of an eye. Depending on the version of the story though, they were either baptized by a cleric so they could reach heaven, or they were ferried off to the other world to be reunited with their father Lear. During their time as swans though, the broken Lear forbade anyone to harm a swan on this island for fear that it may be one of his own children, a law which still stands to this day. Luckily now, the swans and all the other birds of Victoria Park have this vital refuge in which they can thrive and prosper. Their wild spaces of old may have fractured and diminished over the years, but here in the park they have a sanctuary. And when you visit them here, it feels like you can forget the chaos of the city for a little while and be transported back to a land of myth and nature from a time long ago.